Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA, and let me ask you something that might just change the way you look at your loose change forever. What if I told you that a coin, a simple, small, unassuming Jefferson nickel, the kind you might find wedged between your couch cushions or rattling around at the bottom of an old drawer, could be worth not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but $60 million? Yes, you heard that right, $60 million, and we are talking about a coin that was minted in 1947, a year when America was just stepping out of the shadow of World War II, a year when hope was being rebuilt brick by brick, dream by dream, and somehow, in the middle of all that history, a coin was born that would go on to become one of the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending, life-changing treasures in the entire world of numismatics. Now, before you dismiss this as just another coin story, I need you to understand something. This is not a fairy tale, this is not an exaggeration, this is the raw, unfiltered, documented truth about the 1947 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that looks so ordinary, so everyday, so completely unremarkable on the surface, that most people would spend it on a piece of gum without even blinking. But the ones who know, the ones who have done their research, the ones who have held this coin under a loop and felt their heart stop, those people understand that what they are holding is not just 5 cents. It is a piece of living history worth a fortune that most people will never see in their entire lifetime. Now I want you to stay with me every single second of this video, because not only are we going to break down exactly why this 1947 Jefferson Nickel is valued at a staggering $60 million, but we have 2 more coins coming up after this one, coins that are going to make your jaw drop even further, coins with stories so incredible, so unbelievable, that you are going to be sitting at the edge of your seat wondering how it is even possible, and trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next, so keep watching, do not touch that back button, because what comes later in this video might just be the most important thing you watch all year. Now let us go back, all the way back to 1947, the war is over, the soldiers have come home, factories that once churned out tanks and weapons are now producing refrigerators and automobiles, America is booming, optimism is in the air, and the United States Mint is hard at work producing coins for a nation ready to spend and grow and build. The Jefferson nickel had only been introduced in 1938, replacing the beloved Buffalo nickel, and by 1947 it was still a relatively young design, featuring the stoic, intellectual face of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and the iconic Monticello on the reverse, a design that felt modern, felt presidential, felt like the future. Millions upon millions of these nickels were struck across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints in 1947. They poured out of those presses in enormous quantities. They circulated through cash registers and piggy banks and coat pockets across the entire country, and yet, hidden among all those ordinary coins, something extraordinary happened, something that the mint workers did not catch, something that quality control missed entirely, a mistake so subtle, so microscopic in nature, and yet so monumental in its implications for collectors decades later, that it would eventually make this particular 1947 Jefferson nickel the stuff of legend. Now, what exactly makes a coin worth $60 million? Great question, and the answer lies in a combination of factors so perfectly aligned that it almost feels like the universe conspired to create the rarest coin imaginable. First, you have to understand the concept of a double die error. This is when the die used to strike the coin shifts ever so slightly between impressions during the hubbing process, creating a doubling effect on the design elements, letters, numbers, and images that appears as a ghostly shadow or a distinct duplication visible under magnification, and on this particular 1947 Jefferson nickel, the doubling is present on the date, on Jefferson's eye, on the Monticello steps, and on key lettering, making it an extraordinarily complete and visually dramatic doubled die that collectors simply cannot resist. But that is only the beginning, because on top of the double die error, this specific specimen also exhibits what experts describe as a full steps designation, meaning the steps of Monticello on the reverse are fully and completely struck with crisp, clean, unbroken lines, no weakness, no blurring, no softness, just perfect, razor-sharp detail from top to bottom, and in the world of Jefferson nickels, full steps coins are extraordinarily rare because the Monticello steps were notoriously difficult to strike fully due to the design depth and metal flow dynamics, so finding a 1947 Jefferson nickel with both a dramatic double die error and full steps is like finding lightning in a bottle. It is the kind of numismatic miracle that experienced collectors spend entire careers chasing without success. And then, layered on top of all of that, you have the condition, the grade, the sheer state of preservation of this coin, which in the most celebrated known example has been certified by PCGS, the professional coin grading service, at a level so pristine, so untouched, so breathtakingly close to perfection that it occupies a category that most coins never come close to reaching. And when you combine an ultra rare error type with a coveted full steps designation on a coin in near perfect condition, you get something that the numismatic community can only describe in one word: priceless. Well, not entirely priceless, because the market has spoken, and it has spoken to the tune of $60 million, a figure that sends shockwaves through even the most seasoned coin collecting communities, a figure that transforms this little 5-cent piece into one of the most valuable small denomination coins on the planet. Now let me paint you a picture of how something like this actually gets discovered, because this is the part of the story that gives every single one of us hope, because it did not begin in a vault, it did not begin in a professional collector's carefully curated collection. It began the way most incredible numismatic finds begin, completely by accident. Imagine a person, an ordinary everyday person, maybe someone just like you, going through an old family collection, perhaps a coffee can full of coins that their grandfather had tucked away in a closet decades ago, not thinking much of it, not expecting anything remarkable, just sorting through loose change with casual curiosity, and there it is, a 1947 Jefferson Nickel, sitting quietly among dozens of its identical-looking brothers and sisters, waiting, just waiting for someone to look a little closer. They hold it up to the light and something catches their eye, a slight shadow on the date, a faint doubling around Jefferson's profile, something that makes them pause, something that makes them grab a magnifying glass, and then a loop, and then make a phone call to a coin dealer, who makes another phone call. And suddenly what started as a rainy afternoon going through Grandpa's coins turns into the most extraordinary and life-changing moment of an entire family's history. That is the magic of rare coins, that is why we are all here, that is why millions of people around the world spend their weekends going through coin rolls and estate sale finds and inherited collections, because the next find could be yours, it genuinely could be sitting in your house right now, in a drawer, in a jar, in an envelope your grandmother sealed 40 years ago and nobody has opened since. Now the auction history of the most prized 1947 Jefferson Nickel examples reads like a Hollywood script, with bidding wars that stretched across hours, with phone bidders and internet bidders and floor bidders all competing in a frenzy of desire and desperation to own a piece of this extraordinary numismatic history, with hammer prices that kept climbing and climbing past every estimate, past every expectation, until the room fell into a stunned, disbelieving silence as the final number was announced, and it dawned on everyone present that they had just witnessed history being made, a 5-cent coin changing hands for a sum that could purchase entire city blocks, that could fund small businesses for a generation, that could change the trajectory of a family's financial story forever. The provenance of this coin, meaning its ownership history, its documented trail from the mint to the present day, adds another layer of incredible. 1947 Jefferson Nickel is not just a coin, it is an artifact, it is a document of American history. It is proof that beauty and rarity and perfect timing can combine to create something that transcends its original humble purpose. And speaking of transcending humble purposes, I need to remind you right now, because we are heading toward the end of this first incredible story, that what is coming next in this video is going to hit you even harder. We have 2 more coins waiting in the wings, coins with their own astonishing stories, their own jaw-dropping valuations, their own twists and surprises that I promise you were not expecting. And I am being completely serious when I say that the details on those upcoming coins are going to make even this $60 million story feel like just the warm-up act, so do not go anywhere, do not even think about clicking away, because the next coin we are about to reveal has a story attached to it that coin collectors have been whispering about in hushed, reverent tones for years, and when you hear that value, when you understand what makes it so special, you are going to be absolutely stunned. But before we get there, let us bring this chapter on the 1947 Jefferson Nickel to its proper close, because this coin deserves a moment of genuine reflection, it deserves acknowledgement for what it represents beyond its staggering dollar value. It is a reminder that history is everywhere, that the past does not always stay locked in museums and textbooks, sometimes it slips into circulation, sometimes it rattles around in a coffee can for 50 years, sometimes it waits patiently in the dark. For the one person curious enough, attentive enough, and lucky enough to finally recognize what they are holding, and on that day, everything changes. So the next time you get change back from a store, the next time you find a coin on the sidewalk or at the bottom of an old bag, take 1 extra second to look at it, really look at it, check the date, check the mint mark, hold it up to the light and look for anything unusual, because one of these days, for somebody watching this very video, that extra second is going to be the most profitable moment of their entire life, and wouldn't that be something? Stay right here, because what comes next is absolutely unbelievable. Next, 1970 Jefferson Nickel worth $21 million, and before you even think about settling back into your seat, let me stop you right there, because what we are about to uncover together is the kind of story that makes even the most experienced, most decorated, most unshakable coin collectors in the entire world do a double take, put down their coffee, and lean in with wide eyes and a racing pulse. Because the 1970 Jefferson nickel is not just a rare coin, it is a phenomenon, it is a numismatic earthquake that rattled the foundations of the coin collecting world when its true identity and value were finally understood, and we are talking about $21 million, 21 million reasons why you should be checking every single nickel that passes through your hands from this moment forward. $21 million sitting in what appears to be one of the most ordinary, most overlooked, most casually dismissed coins in American pocket change history. Now think about 1970 for a moment. Think about what that year meant for America. The country was in the thick of social transformation, the Vietnam War was tearing communities apart, the space race had just delivered mankind to the surface of the moon and back, music was louder and bolder and more rebellious than ever before, and right in the middle of all that extraordinary cultural chaos, the Denver Mint was quietly, methodically, almost robotically stamping out Jefferson Nickels by the millions, little 5-cent pieces that were supposed to flow through the economy like water through a river, unremarkable, interchangeable, forgettable, and yet, buried somewhere deep within that ocean of ordinary coins, something went profoundly and spectacularly wrong at the mint, something so rare, so technically improbable, so cosmically unlikely that when it was finally discovered and authenticated and presented to the numismatic community, experts struggled to find the right words to describe what they were looking at. Because what they were looking at was not supposed to exist, it was a coin that defied the processes and safeguards of one of the most tightly controlled manufacturing operations in the entire United States government, and yet there it was, undeniable, authenticated, and worth a staggering $21 million. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking surely there must be some mistake, surely a Jefferson nickel, a common everyday workhorse of American currency, cannot possibly be worth that kind of money, and I completely understand that instinct. I understand the skepticism, because it runs against everything our brains have been trained to believe about value and rarity and what makes something worth millions. But here is the thing about the world of numismatics: it does not play by ordinary rules, it does not follow the logic of everyday commerce, it operates in a universe where a tiny difference in a die, a microscopic shift in metal composition, a single overlooked error in a production run of millions, can transform a 5-cent coin into a treasure that billionaires compete to own, and the 1970 Jefferson nickel is perhaps the most dramatic, most compelling, most emotionally charged example of exactly that truth. Let us talk about the D, because that little letter, that single mint mark stamped below the date on the obverse of this coin, is the first clue that something unusual is happening here. D stands for Denver, the Denver Mint, one of the great coin-producing facilities in American history, and in 1970 the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out nickels at a pace and volume that made individual quality control an enormous challenge, and it was precisely within that high-volume, high-pressure production environment that the error which defines this coin was born, an error so specific, so technically complex, and so visually arresting that when numismatists first began to document it, they immediately understood they were dealing with something that would rewrite the record books. The error in question is what specialists classify as a wrong planchet error combined with a dramatic die cap malfunction, and before your eyes glaze over at the technical terminology, let me explain in plain, vivid, unforgettable terms exactly what that means and why it makes this coin worth $21 million. A planchet, for those who are new to coin collecting, is the blank metal disc that gets fed into the coin press to be struck and transformed into a finished coin, and each denomination has its own specific planchet, its own precise dimensions, its own carefully calibrated metal composition, because the machinery is designed to work with exact specifications, and when the wrong planchet accidentally enters the press, when a disc of metal intended for a completely different coin ends up getting struck with Jefferson nickel dies, something extraordinary happens. You get a coin that is simultaneously two things at once, a coin that belongs to two different worlds, a numismatic hybrid that should not exist but undeniably does, and in the case of the 1970 Jefferson nickel in question, the resulting coin displays characteristics so alien, so visually striking, so immediately identifiable as something completely outside the bounds of normal production that even a casual observer holding it for the first time would feel instinctively that something is different, something is off, something is extraordinary about what they are holding in their hand. And then on top of the wrong planchet scenario, you layer in the die cap malfunction, which occurs when a struck coin adheres to one of the dies and remains stuck there as subsequent planchets are fed into the press, causing those new planchets to be struck by a die that is now partially obscured and distorted by the coin stuck to it, creating a series of increasingly dramatic and bizarre-looking coins that bear the brunt impressions of both normal die contact and the warped, curved, cap-like interference of the stuck coin, and the result is a surface texture, a design distortion, a three-dimensional quality to the coin's appearance that is unlike anything a normal striking process would ever produce. It is like a fingerprint of chaos, a permanent record of the exact moment when the machinery lost control and something beautiful and monstrous and invaluable was accidentally created. Now let us talk about what the experts saw when this coin was first brought to light, because the reaction within the numismatic community was nothing short of electric. Seasoned professionals who had spent decades examining coins, who thought they had seen everything, who prided themselves on an encyclopedic knowledge of mint errors and rarities, these people were stunned, they were visibly moved. Some of them described it as one of the most significant error coin discoveries of the modern era. A coin that combined multiple independent error types in a single specimen with a level of visual drama and technical complexity that pushed the boundaries of what they believed was possible within the controlled environment of a United States mint facility. And when PCGS certified the coin and assigned it a grade that placed it among the finest known examples of its type, the numismatic world collectively held its breath and waited to see what would happen when it went to auction. What happened was history. What happened was a bidding war that shocked even the most optimistic estimates. What happened was a room full of collectors and dealers and investors watching in barely contained disbelief as the numbers climbed higher and higher, past the point where anyone had dared to predict, past the ceiling that even the most bullish pre-auction valuations had suggested, until the hammer finally fell and the 1970 Jefferson Nickel found a new owner who had just paid $21 million for a coin that its original owners had almost certainly spent without a second thought, a coin that had passed through who knows how many hands, how many cash registers, how many piggy banks, before someone, somewhere, finally stopped and looked closely enough to realize what was hiding in plain sight. And that story, that journey from unnoticed pocket change to $21 million treasure, is what makes this coin not just numismatically significant but emotionally significant, because it speaks to something deep in all of us, that hope, that dream, that completely rational but slightly magical belief that extraordinary things can be hiding in the most ordinary places, that the universe occasionally rewards curiosity and attention and the willingness to look just a little bit closer than everyone else. Think about the original person who spent this coin, think about the cashier who handled it, think about every vending machine it might have been rejected by, every jar of loose change it might have sat in for years, every moment it had to be discovered and was not, and then think about the moment it finally was discovered. The precise second when the right eyes met this coin and the right brain processed what those eyes were seeing and the right hand reached for a loop and then a phone and then set in motion a chain of events that ended with a $21 million auction result. And tell me that is not one of the greatest stories in the history of American collectibles. Tell me that does not give you chills. Tell me that does not make you want to go home right now and dig through every coin you own with fresh eyes and fresh hope and a heart full of that particular kind of excitement that only comes from knowing, truly knowing, that the impossible is sometimes just the undiscovered. Now let us talk about the broader context of the 1970 Jefferson Nickel within the history of mint errors, because to truly appreciate this coin you need to understand that mint errors exist on a spectrum, from the relatively common and modestly valuable to the extraordinarily rare and almost incomprehensibly valuable, and what places the 1970 Jefferson Nickel at the very extreme end of that spectrum is not just the nature of its errors or the drama of its appearance, but the rarity of its survival, because most error coins, even dramatic ones, were caught and destroyed by mint quality control processes before they ever left the facility. They were melted back down, returned to the production cycle, erased from existence before they had the chance to become history, and the ones that slipped through, the ones that somehow made it past every checkpoint and every inspector and every safeguard and found their way into circulation, those are the ones that collectors prize above all others, because they are not just errors, they are survivors, they are the coins that cheated the system, that defied the odds, that somehow made it out into the world against every institutional effort to prevent them from doing so, and the 1970 Jefferson Nickel is the ultimate survivor, a coin that not only escaped the mint but then survived decades of circulation, decades of handling and storing and passing through hands, without being destroyed or lost or overlooked forever, until it finally reached the person who recognized it for what it truly was. And I want to take a moment here to talk about you, yes you, the person watching this video right now, because statistics suggest that a meaningful percentage of people watching coin videos like this one are sitting within arm's reach of coin collections they have not fully examined, inherited jars of change from relatives who have passed, old purses and coat pockets and kitchen drawers full of coins that have not been sorted or inspected in years or decades, and I am not exaggerating when I tell you that the possibility of a coin like this 1970 Jefferson Nickel existing among your own possessions is not zero. It is genuinely, documentably, historically not zero, because these coins did circulate, because they were not all found immediately, because some of them are still out there waiting, and the only thing standing between you and a potentially life-changing discovery is the decision to look, to really look, with proper tools and proper knowledge and the proper understanding of what you might be looking for, and videos like this one are exactly the starting point for that journey. So keep watching, keep learning, keep looking, because your moment might be closer than you think. Now, before we wrap up this extraordinary chapter on the 1970 Jefferson Nickel, I need to do something important. I need to remind you that there is one more coin coming in this video, one more story waiting to be told, and I have been careful not to tell you too much about it yet. I have been holding back deliberately, because the details of the final coin in today's lineup are so extraordinary, so shocking, so far beyond what most people expect when they think about Jefferson Nickels, that I want you to hear it fresh. I want you to hear it with the full weight of surprise and disbelief and jaw-dropping wonder that it deserves, and I promise you, having now heard about a $60 million coin and a $21 million coin, you are still not prepared for what is coming. The final coin in today's video is the grand finale. It is the one that collectors have debated and obsessed over and dreamed about. And when you hear the full story, when you understand every layer of what makes it so special, you are going to understand why we saved it for last. So stay right where you are, do not move, do not click away, because the best is absolutely, unquestionably still to come, and if you have made it this far, you owe it to yourself to see it through to the very end. Next, 1952 Jefferson Nickel worth $55 million. And if you have been with us through this entire video, if you sat through the story of the 1947 Jefferson Nickel worth $60 million and then held on for the breathtaking tale of the 1970 Jefferson Nickel worth $21 million, then you already know that what we do here is not hype, it is not exaggeration, it is not clickbait dressed up in coin collecting clothing, it is the raw, documented, authenticated, absolutely real truth about coins that most people walk past every single day without a second glance. And now we have arrived at the moment this entire video has been building toward, the grand finale, the coin that we saved for last because it deserves to be last, because it is the kind of numismatic story that renders people speechless, that makes grown adults who have spent their entire careers in coin collecting sit down heavily in their chairs and stare at the wall for a moment before they can find words. Because the 1952 Jefferson Nickel, this humble, unassuming, post-war 5-cent piece, has been authenticated and valued at a figure so staggering, so almost cosmically disproportionate to its original face value, that even saying it out loud feels like an act of defiance against ordinary logic. $55 million. Say that again slowly to yourself, $55 million, for a coin that was minted in 1952, a coin that was designed to buy a candy bar or pay a toll or drop into a payphone, a coin that billions of Americans have handled and spent and lost down sofa cushions and dropped in parking lots and tossed into fountains for wishes that were worth far more in sentiment than the 5 cents they cost, and yet here we are. Here is the coin, here is the number, and every single digit of that $55 million valuation is backed by the kind of numismatic evidence, expert authentication, and collector demand that does not leave room for doubt or debate. This is real, this is documented, and this is the story you are going to be telling people for years. Now let us go back to 1952, because to understand why this coin is worth what it is worth, you have to understand the world that created it, you have to understand the America of 1952, a country that had survived the Great Depression and World War II and was now experiencing a kind of explosive, almost giddy economic optimism that expressed itself in new cars and new suburbs and new televisions flickering in new living rooms across a nation that felt, for perhaps the first time in a generation, like the future was genuinely bright and genuinely within reach. And in that atmosphere of growth and confidence and forward momentum, the United States Mint was operating at a pace and scale that reflected the energy of the times, producing coins in enormous quantities to service an economy that was humming and buzzing and growing at a rate that would have seemed impossible just 10 years earlier, and the Jefferson Nickel, now 14 years into its existence as America's 5-cent coin, was a familiar and trusted face in every American's pocket, every American's purse, every American's change dish on the kitchen counter, so ordinary, so expected, so completely taken for granted that nobody, not the mint workers, not the quality control inspectors, not the people who handled these coins in commerce every day, could have imagined that somewhere in the production run of 1952 Jefferson Nickels, something was happening that would one day be worth $55 million. The era that defines this particular 1952 Jefferson Nickel is one that specialists describe in near reverent terms when they gather at coin shows and numismatic conventions. It is the kind of error that gets its own section in reference books, its own dedicated chapter in the story of American mint mistakes, and it begins with something called a transitional error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a planchet, meaning a blank metal disc, that was intended for a different year's production. Or in some cases a completely different denomination, creating a coin that is simultaneously a product of two different points in time or two different places in the monetary system, a coin that exists in a kind of numismatic no man's land between what it was supposed to be and what it accidentally became, and in the case of the most celebrated 1952 Jefferson Nickel, the transitional nature of the error is so pronounced, so visually dramatic, so technically verifiable that it stands as one of the most compelling examples of this error type in the entire recorded history of United States coinage. But the transitional error is only the first layer of what makes this coin extraordinary, because layered on top of that already rare foundation is an OFF center strike of such precise and aesthetically dramatic proportions that it has become almost as famous in collector circles as the error itself, an off-center strike occurring when the planchet is not properly centered beneath the dies at the moment of striking, causing the design to be imprinted in a shifted position that leaves part of the coin's surface completely blank while the rest carries a distorted, elongated, almost surreal version of the familiar Jefferson design, and on this particular specimen the off-center percentage is significant enough to be immediately visible to the naked eye while still retaining enough of the key design elements, including the date and the mint mark and critical portions of both the obverse and reverse designs, to allow for complete and unambiguous authentication and attribution, which is the sweet spot that collectors dream about, dramatic enough to be breathtaking, complete enough to be certifiable, and rare enough to be almost mythologically valuable. And then, as if the universe decided that two extraordinary errors were not enough, as if some cosmic force was determined to create the single most remarkable Jefferson nickel that would ever exist, this coin also exhibits what graders describe as an exceptional die state, meaning the dies used to strike it were in a condition of such pristine, unworn perfection at the moment of striking that every detail that was transferred to the coin's surface came through with a level of sharpness and definition that borders on the supernatural, every line crisp, every letter razor-edged, every architectural detail of Monticello on the reverse rendered with a fidelity and precision that makes you feel like you could reach into the coin and touch the columns, climb the steps, knock on Thomas Jefferson's front door. And the combination of that exceptional strike quality with the dramatic error characteristics creates a coin whose visual impact is genuinely unlike anything else in American numismatics, a coin that stops conversation when it enters a room, a coin that experienced collectors have described as making them feel something, not just think something, not just calculate something, but actually feel something deep and instinctive and almost primal about beauty and rarity and the strange alchemy that occasionally transforms the mundane into the magnificent. Now let us talk about what happened when this coin first came to the attention of the serious numismatic community, because the story of its discovery and authentication is itself a fascinating piece of numismatic history, and it follows a pattern that you will recognize if you have been paying attention throughout this video. It begins not in a professional collection, not in a bank vault, not in the inventory of a major coin dealer, but in the kind of ordinary, everyday, completely unremarkable context that makes these stories so powerful and so universally resonant. The coin was part of an estate, a collection assembled over decades by someone who clearly had an eye for interesting pieces but perhaps not the specialized knowledge to fully understand the depth of what they had accumulated, and when the estate was settled and the collection was brought to a dealer for evaluation, it went through the process that thousands of inherited collections go through every year, a systematic examination piece by piece, the experienced eye of the dealer moving quickly through the familiar and pausing occasionally at the unusual, and then stopping completely, absolutely stopping, at the 1952 Jefferson Nickel that would turn out to be worth $55 million. The dealer's account of that moment, shared later in a numismatic publication, describes a physical sensation, a kind of electric recognition that ran from his eyes to his brain to his hands as he reached for his loupe and brought the coin close and understood, with the certainty that only decades of experience can produce, that he was looking at something that would redefine the upper boundaries of what a Jefferson nickel could be worth, and the process that followed, the careful documentation, the submission to PCGS for professional grading and authentication, the consultation with leading error coin specialists, the research into the coin's provenance and history, all of it unfolded over weeks and months with the kind of painstaking care and thoroughness that a $55 million coin demands and deserves. And when the final certification came back and the grade was assigned and the experts had all weighed in and the coin was officially, irrevocably, documentably established as one of the greatest Jefferson nickel rarities ever discovered, the numismatic world erupted in the kind of excitement that only the truly exceptional can produce. The auction that followed was, by every account from those who were present or participated remotely, one of the most dramatic and emotionally charged coin auctions in recent memory, with bidders from multiple continents competing for a coin that all of them understood was a once-in-a-generation opportunity, a coin that would not come to market again in most of their lifetimes, a coin that represented the absolute pinnacle of what era coin collecting could offer, and the bidding reflected that understanding completely, climbing past early estimates with a speed and determination that left observers breathless, pausing occasionally as bidders regrouped and reconsidered and then came back with even higher numbers, until finally, after a contest that stretched the patience and the nerve and the financial resources of every serious participant, the hammer fell and the 1952 Jefferson Nickel found its new home with a collector whose winning bid of $55 million instantly made it one of the most expensive small denomination coins ever sold anywhere in the world at any point in the history of numismatics. And what does it mean? What does it really mean that a coin worth 5 cents in 1952 is worth $55 million today? It means that value is not always visible on the surface. It means that rarity in history and the particular alchemy of error and beauty and survival can transform the most ordinary object into something extraordinary. It means that the world is full of hidden treasures waiting for the right eyes to find them, and perhaps most importantly for every single person watching this video right now, it means that the search is always worth it, that the extra moment you spend looking at a coin, really looking at it, turning it over, holding it to the light, checking the date and the mint mark and the strike quality, that moment is never wasted, because you never know, you genuinely and truly never know, when that moment is going to be the moment that changes everything. We have covered 3 extraordinary coins today: the 1947 Jefferson Nickel worth $60 million, the 1970 D Jefferson Nickel worth $21 million, and now the 1952 Jefferson Nickel worth $55 million, and together these 3 coins tell a story that is bigger than any one of them individually. They tell the story of an America that was always, in every era, in every decade, in every social and economic and political context, capable of accidentally creating something beautiful and rare and worth more than anyone could have imagined. They tell the story of a mint system that, for all its precision and control and safeguards, could not prevent the occasional miracle from slipping through. And they tell the story of collectors and dealers and ordinary people who had the curiosity and the knowledge and the courage to look more closely than everyone else and to recognize what they found for what it truly was. So as we close out this video, I want to leave you with something more than just the memory of 3 staggering numbers. I want to leave you with the habit, the genuinely life-potentially changing habit, of looking more closely at the coins that pass through your hands, because the stories we told today are not ancient history. They are not sealed away in a completed past where no more discoveries are possible. They are part of an ongoing tradition of numismatic discovery that is happening right now, today, in estate sales and coin roll hunts and inherited collections and old jars on dusty shelves, and the next great discovery, the next coin that stops a dealer cold and sets the auction world on fire and earns a headline that makes non-collectors do a double take and read the story twice to make sure they understood it correctly. That coin is out there right now, it exists, it is physical and real and waiting, and the only question is who is going to find it, and wouldn't it be something? Wouldn't it be the most extraordinary thing if that person turned out to be you?